The anime begins by showing two childhood close friends, Kosuke and Natsume, who were inseparable. They looked so much alike that they could have been siblings. They spent all their time together, and Natsume even spent a lot of time at Kosuke's apartment with him and his grandfather. The three of them were like a family. Tragically, Kosuke's grandfather passed away, and after that, Kosuke and Natsume's relationship became strained. They stopped talking to each other, even though they were in the same class at school. Kosuke and Natsume were fortunate to have other friends at school, including Reina, Yuri, Taisher, and Yuzuru. Despite the distance that had grown between them, Kosuke and Natsume remained connected through their shared group of friends. On the last day of school, before summer vacation, the students were excitedly sharing their vacation plans with each other. Reina and Taisher were no exception. Reina was planning a trip to the United States with her family, while Taisher wanted to hunt ghosts in a haunted apartment building. Despite the fact that their plans were at odds with each other, they both wanted Kosuke to join them. This led to a disagreement between the two friends, each trying to convince Kosuke to join them. Unfortunately, Kosuke was still mourning the loss of his grandfather and initially refused the invitations of his friends. He ran home instead. But Taisher wouldn't take no for an answer and persist in trying to get Kosuke to come with them to the haunted apartment building. In the end, Kosuke gave in and agreed to join Taisher and Yuzuru on their ghost hunt. The next day, the three of them sneaked into the building in broad daylight, ready to face any ghosts they might encounter. From the outside, the old apartment building certainly looked creepy, which only fueled Taisher's belief that they would find plenty of ghosts inside. Little did they know, this was the building where Kosuke and Natsume used to live. The building was now abandoned and slated for demolition, but Kosuke had many memories of the place, particularly of his grandfather who had also lived there. He took Taisher and Yuzuru to his grandfather's old apartment and began exploring. Taisher was still eager to hunt ghosts, running from room to room with his net and opening closets in search of spirits. But when he opened the closet in Kosuke's old bedroom, they were surprised to find Natsume sleeping inside. A few moments later, Natsume woke up to the noise the three boys were making. To their amazement, she explained that she often slept in the abandoned apartment building to keep a boy company who still lived there. His name was Nappo, and he was always on the roof, according to Natsume. The four of them went to the roof to look for Nappo, but they couldn't find anyone there. Kosuke began to suspect that Natsume was lying to them. The two of them got into an argument as Natsume insisted that Nappo was real. As they were quarreling, Reina and Yuri happened to pass by the building and wondered why their friends were on the roof of the haunted building. But as soon as Reina saw that Kosuke was there too, she ran inside, followed by Yuri. As soon as Reina arrived on the roof and saw Kosuke and Natsume in a tense confrontation, she immediately scolded Kosuke, accusing him of harassing Natsume. She even tried to destroy the tent that Natsume had set up for Nappo. However, as she was kicking the tent, she accidentally discovered an old camera belonging to Kosuke's late grandfather inside. Kosuke was furious with Natsume for taking his grandfather's things without permission. He pointed out that as she was not a member of the family, she had no right to keep the camera. Natsume was understandably offended by Kosuke's rude treatment of her and grabbed the camera before running to the end of the roof. Unfortunately, the rain had made the floor slippery, and she accidentally fell off the roof. That's when strange things started to happen. The rain, which had been lightly spattering before, suddenly turned into a downpour, making it difficult to see anything around them. When the rain finally subsided, they were shocked to find the apartment building floating in the middle of the ocean. Fortunately, the water had helped to cushion Natsume's fall from the roof, and she was able to swim back to the building and reunite with her friends. They began to suspect that Natsume might know why they were stranded in the middle of the ocean. After all, she had previously claimed to often sneak into the building to meet Nappo, so she must have known something about the place that they didn't. However, Natsume insisted that she didn't know anything and went downstairs. Moments later, as they were still trying to wrap their heads around what had happened, they saw something even stranger. It turned out that the apartment building was not the only one floating in the middle of the ocean. They saw an ordinary house passing by as if it were a ship. Feeling that it would be useless to try to understand the strange phenomenon they were experiencing, Kosuke led his friends in an effort to seek help. For the next few hours, they fired flares that they had found in one of the apartments, wrote SOS on the roof, and shouted for help every time another building passed by. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain and no help came. Later that night, the boys decided to look for Natsume downstairs. Instead of finding her, they stumbled upon a mysterious figure that frightened them. They screamed in terror and ran away, thinking that the figure was the ghost of the apartment building's caretaker. But Natsum soon reassured them that the figure was actually Napo, the boy she had told them about earlier in the day. He wasn't creepy at all, so there was no need to be afraid of him. The situation improved slightly for the children once they were able to find food supplies in some of the apartments. Natsum also told them that she had been in this situation before and had eventually been able to return home after falling asleep. This gave the other children a glimmer of hope, as they thought that all they had to do was sleep and everything would return to normal when they woke up. However, when they woke up the next morning, they were disappointed to find that they were still stuck in the middle of the ocean. They knew that they had to survive on the food supplies they had found in the building, but they also knew that those supplies would eventually run out and they would have to find more food. Kosuke began to strategize about how they could get more food. He thought about using a rope to jump to a house that was floating closer to their building and search for food that was still safe to eat. It was a risky plan, but they were running out of options. The next day, Natsum approached Kosuke with his grandfather's camera. It turned out that she had taken the camera in order to fix it and give it to Kosuke as a birthday present. She returned the camera to him and their relationship began to improve. One day, as all the kids were having lunch together, Napo finally decided to reveal his true identity to them. He told them that he was the spirit of the apartment building and had been alive since the building was constructed. This revelation came as a shock to the kids, but after Taisher touched and pinched Napo's cheek, he was able to convince the others that Napo was just like them and not dangerous, even though he was a spirit. Then it was Natsum's turn to share her past. She told Napo about how close she had been to Kosuke when they were growing up. Natsum's parents were divorced, and her mother often left her in the care of Kosuke's grandfather, Yasuji, when she had to go to work. Natsum and Kosuke practically grew up together, since Kosuke was also living with Yasuji at the time. They were like siblings, because they spent so much time together. However, over time, Kosuke began to feel envious of the close relationship between Yasuji and Natsum. He felt that Natsum had no right to be so close to Yasuji because she was not his granddaughter. This jealousy caused Kosuke to start acting cold towards Natsum. Back in the present, the children began to feel hopeless as no help came and their food supplies dwindled. That is, until one day they saw a mall floating toward their building. Kosuke, Natsum, and Napo decided to try to reach the mall using an impromptu raft, hoping to find food supplies there. Meanwhile, their friends stayed behind to help them cross and monitor the movement of the mall. Once the trio entered the mall, they found it to be run down and old. They were able to find food, even though it was outdated. But they took it anyway, believing it was still safe to eat. As they were about to return to their building, Taisher suddenly contacted Kosuke through a walkie-talkie and informed him that the mall was constantly drifting towards their apartment building. Sure enough, moments later the mall crashed into the apartment building, causing a violent shock that knocked Yuri off the roof. Fortunately, she was able to grasp the edge of the building before falling into the ocean. Seeing her friend in danger, Natsum urged Kosuke and Napo to hurry back. Once their raft returned to the apartment building, Natsum rushed to the roof and rescued Yuri. However, Yuri hit the floor hard and was unconscious due to the shock. As Natsum was rescuing Yuri, she herself fell into the ocean. Napo quickly dove into the water to save her, but they were confronted by a strange creature that ate one of Napo's legs. Despite this, Napo was able to save Natsum, but at the cost of his own leg. The incident caused Reina to lose control and start screaming frantically at Natsum, blaming her for everything that had happened. It took Kosuke pleading with her to calm down for her to regain her composure. They knew that they needed to stay calm if they wanted to find a way out of their situation, and blaming each other wouldn't help. Therefore, the children decided to go to Napo and ask him to tell them how they could get home. After being pressed for answers, Napo finally revealed that he may have accidentally taken them to his realm, but he didn't know how to get them back home. The only solution he could think of was to make a large raft and set sail in search of a way home. They had to act quickly, as the apartment building was sinking due to the collision with the mall earlier. The children began collecting materials to make the raft and prepared a place for Napo on it. However, when the raft was completed and they were about to set sail, Napo suddenly chose to stay behind. He pushed Kosuke onto the raft and kicked it away, preventing them from forcing him to come along. All the kids could do was look on in astonishment as Napo turned around and walked away. All except for Natsum, who jumped into the water and desperately swam back toward Napo. She didn't want to lose the friend she had come to consider. Fortunately, she was able to reach the building, but the bad news was that the apartment building was about to be sunk by a violent storm. At this point, Natsum and Napo had resigned themselves to their fate and were prepared to die. Meanwhile, Kosuke continued to call for Natsume to come back as he searched for a way to save her. By chance, their raft floated near a Ferris wheel, and Kosuke quickly came up with an idea. He climbed up to the Ferris wheel and pulled on the rope that was hanging there. Then, when the Ferris wheel was close enough to the apartment building, he jumped into the building and secured the rope to one of the protuberances, hoping to use the Ferris wheel to pull the building and prevent it from sinking. Unfortunately, the rope was not able to hold the weight of the building and snapped, separating Kosuke, Natsume, and Nappo from their friends. Miraculously, they survived the storm and were reunited with Reina, Taisher, and the others the next morning. It turned out that the Ferris wheel was drifting in the same direction as the apartment building, and both ended up on an island that was the origin of Nappo. When Kosuke and the others reached the island, they were amazed to find that it was beautiful, with small children playing together. However, Nappo forbade them from setting foot on the island, explaining that it was the home of spirits like him and that if humans like Kosuke and the others stayed there, they would never be able to return home. Only Nappo was allowed to stay on the island, while Kosuke and the others were escorted home by a magical blue creature who knew nothing about their situation. After they returned home, Kosuke and Natsume were able to repair their relationship and go back to their normal lives. One day, as they walked home from school together, they saw the apartment building being demolished. Seeing the scene, they wondered if the strange incident from a few days before had been just a dream or if it was real. But when they saw the photos that they had taken with Kosuke's grandfather's camera while they were stranded in the ocean, they were convinced that it was real. Nappo was even in the photos as proof.